In 1940, a few weeks before the passing of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, he gave out a maamar, a Chassidic discourse, to be printed and to be disseminated amongst his Chassidim, to be studied on the 10th day of the month of Shevat. On that day, when they gave out the maamar to learn the maamar, that was the day that the previous Rebbe passed away. And so when the 7th Rebbe took over, our Rebbe, he said that this maamar of Basi Legani was the last will and testament that the previous Rebbe gave to the Chassidim and to the world. And this is the teaching and inspiration that he wants us to live by until the coming of Mashiach. The maamar Basi Legani was made up of 4 different maamarim. And of the 4 different maamarim, there were 20 paragraphs or chapters. And these 20 chapters were used by the Rebbe every year on Yud Shevat, when the Rebbe would bring in honor of his father-in-law and predecessor. And every year, the Rebbe would expound on a different chapter of that maamar. And so this year, the chapter that the Rebbe would expound upon would be chapter number 5. What does chapter number 5 in the maamar talk about? There, the Frierdiker Rebbe brings a story from the Gemara, the tractate of Ksubis, page 17, side A. And there the Gemara says, Amru Allah va Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi. It is told about Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Eloi, that he would take a branch of a hados, a branch of a myrtle, and he would dance before the kala, before the bride. The Gemara goes on to say that Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yitzchak, would take 3 branches of the myrtle, and he would juggle these 3 branches in front of the kala, in front of the bride at a wedding, to bring joy to the chassan and the kala. Rabbi Zera, who came after them, would say that Kamachsiv lon sava. He said that the elder, Rabbi Yitzchak, is embarrassing us. He's embarrassing the scholars. For a rabbi like Rabbi Yitzchak to juggle these hadassim, to juggle these myrtles in front of the kala, is something which is not fitting for a great Torah sage. However, after the passing of Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak, says the Gemara, a pillar of fire passed over the grave of Rabbi Shmuel to separate him from the rest of the world. And so Rabbi Zera said at that time, it is clear that the branch of Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak is what brought him this dignity and brought him this greatness, that he should be separated amongst all the scholars of his time. For only 1 or 2 scholars in a generation receive such a funeral, receive such an honor by God, that a pillar of fire should pass over them. The Gemara goes on to say that there are those who say that it wasn't the branch of Rabbi Shmuel, but rather the folly of Rabbi Shmuel. For the word branch is shutisei, and the word for folly is shtusei. It's the same letters. And then there was a third opinion in the Talmud that it was shitasei. It was the approach and the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yitzchak, that brought him this great glory and this great dignity. And in this chapter, the previous Rebbe talks about this concept of this Gemara, that we know that the word shtus, which means folly, is the purpose of all sin, because a Jew cannot and does not want to separate himself from God. So why is it that a Jew does a sin? How is it possible? It's only because the Jew talks into himself that, God doesn't really care. God cares about the big things, idolatry, Shabbos, but the small things like kosher, tefillin, candlelighting, these small things God doesn't really care about. I don't sever my relationship with God because of these things. This, however, says the Gemara, is called shtus. It's called a folly. And ein adam, a person is not seen, elim kein nichnas bei ruach shtus, unless a spirit of folly enters into him. And this is the reason why in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple, God commanded the Jewish people through Moses to build the Mishkan, which is the holiest place on earth, with atzei shittim. The word atzei shittim means acacia wood, but the word shittim again means the word folly, wood of folly, because the purpose of the Holy Temple was to transform the folly of this world into folly of holiness. In other words, because the sin came about through folly, therefore the tshuva, the repentance, also has to come about through folly. What is the folly? The Chassidic Rebbe in the maamar goes on to say that in America and in the world, people have folly. What's the folly? We have to do this because everybody else does it, even though it doesn't necessarily make sense. You know, for example, you take off a lunch break. Why am I going on a lunch break? I'm not hungry. Well, it's lunch break. Everybody's taking a lunch break. I also have to take a lunch break. But you're not hungry. It doesn't matter. That's what everybody does. And when it comes to work, of course, I have to be on time, exactly 8:30 or 9 o'clock on the dot, and exactly 5 o'clock I punch out. I have to be there on time, I have to leave on time, I have to do everything that everybody else does. That's a big folly. Why is it a big folly? Because all it is money. And your money you can't take with you. When it comes to Kedusha, when it comes to holiness, when it comes to spirituality, when you go to heaven after 120 years, they don't accept any checks. They don't accept cash. They don't accept credit cards. They only accept receipts. Receipts from the tzedakah, receipts from the tefillin you put on, receipts from the kosher you ate, receipts from the Shabbos you kept. That is what they accept in heaven. When it comes to these things, we have folly. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that. Shul starts 9:45. I don't have to be the first one in shul. I come 11:45. Who cares? That makes no difference. When it came to work, you were the first one there. When it comes to shul, you come the last and you leave the first. That's a folly. It's a folly because these are the important things in life. This is what gives a Jew true life, eternal life. And these things we push aside. It doesn't make any sense. It's not that important. But things that are only temporary, and things that are finite, and things that you can't take with you to the world to come, we have the folly. We have to be the first one, and the best one, and the smartest one, and make the most money, etc., etc. What is the purpose of the soul coming down to this world? What is the objective of every Jew and every soul? So the Chassidic Rebbe goes on to say in the maamar, this is based on Tehillim, King David's book of Psalms, in chapter or kapitel Ayin Gimel, chapter 73. Over there it says, "V'ani var v'le'eda behemois ha'yisi imach." King David says, I was senseless. I did not understand. I was like an animal that has no brains. However, if I need Tamir Imach, I am constantly with you. So the Chassidic Rebbe explains, what does it mean I'm constantly with you? That the only way a Jew can truly be constantly with God is if he is senseless and does not know and he's like an animal. In other words, if you by removing your garments of intellect, your garments of seichel and understanding, that is the only way a person can truly connect with God. Why? Because no matter how smart one is, even if he has the brains and the intellect and capacity of Aristotle and Plato and Einstein all together, however, intellect by definition is finite. It's something that you grasp, you understand. And therefore, it's a limitation. God, however, is Ein Sof. God is infinite. So to be able to grasp God, you have to remove your garments. You have to remove your intellect. You have to remove your sense. and you have to consider yourself to be an animal. In other words, that has no brains. And by doing that, then you have the ability, one can truly be constantly with God. And this is what the Alter Rebbe would say very often during davening. When I am with you, says King David, and these are the words the Alter Rebbe would repeat, when I am with you, I desire nothing else. The Alter Rebbe would say, I don't desire your lower paradise. I don't desire your higher paradise. I don't desire your Olam Haba, your world to come. I only desire you. I want you yourself, God, nothing else. He wanted the essence of God. And this, in truth, is the yearning of every single soul of every Jew. As King David says in Tehillim, which he wrote for all the Jewish people, I am constantly with you. I desire nothing else in the entire world. When I am with you, I want nothing else. And that's why we find, says the Lubavitcher Rebbe in the maamar, that when prophets would prophesy, they would very often remove their clothing, they would remove their garments. Because the garment represented a limitation. For them to be able to be a channel, an interface between God and the world, they had to remove their garments to allow God in. With this in mind, the Rebbe explains, we can understand now the Gemara. We said earlier that Rabbi Yehuda would juggle or dance with one hadas, one myrtle. Rabbi Shmuel would dance with 3. And Rabbi Zera complained, but later he saw how a pillar of fire came into the world. What's going on over here? What's the difference between 1 myrtle and 3 myrtles? And what does it mean that he saw a pillar of fire coming into the world? So the Rebbe explains, when the Gemara tells a story of a Chassid or a Tzaddik or a Rebbe, the story represents their essence. And who is a Chassid, says the Alter Rebbe in Tanya? One who is a Chassid is Hamas Chassidim Koinoi, one who does kindness with his Maker, with God. In other words, he desires nothing for himself. He doesn't desire money. He doesn't desire glory. He doesn't desire even paradise. He only wants to do what God needs. And therefore, when the Torah and the Talmud tells us a story of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi that he was dancing with a hadas, this implies that that was his whole essence. And that is, this dancing with the hadas represents the idea of folly of holiness. And his entire connection to God was dancing. Beyond limitation, beyond intellect. He had one connection with God. And that was the connection of when I am with you, I desire nothing else in the entire world. And that is really the purpose of prayer. When a person davens and prays, the idea of prayer is to know God. The idea of davening is da lifnei mi'ata omed, to know before whom you stand. The word das v'yoda means connection, that a Jew should connect with God. That is the purpose of davening. The Baal Shem Tov would say, how great is God? How much mercy does God have? That every time after I daven, I'm still alive. Because when I daven, I forget about the whole world. I leave all my garments behind. I connect with the essence of God. God is infinite. A human being cannot connect with the infinite. And after davening, the miracle is that I'm still alive, because normally after such an intense, energetic, deep, emotional, intimate relation with God, it's impossible to survive. And that is really the objective and the mission of every Jew when he davens, to forget about the entire world and to become one with God. And that was Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi. He had one connection, one hadas, one myrtle. The myrtle looks like the letter Vav, represents a connection. He had one connection with God, and that connection was a connection that he danced with, because he was beyond time and space. He wasn't limited to the physical world. He was going out of his kelim, out of his vessels, out of his limitations, out of his intellect. But Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi was the first generation, and therefore he danced with one hadas. That represents prayer. Came along Rab Shmuel in a later generation. He took this one hadas and he made it into 3 hadasim, implying that not only can one be connected to God in prayer, like the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov, but one can take this folly that is beyond intellect and bring it into also the study of Torah, and also into his daily routine of tzedakah, to give charity more than his capacity, and to be able to live a life of holiness, and to go beyond the folly of the rest of the world. So Rab Shmuel brought it down into 3 different hadassim, alluding to the 3 pillars upon which the world stands: Torah, prayer, and charity. Rab Zera said, a pillar of fire came into the world. At first, he couldn't comprehend Rab Shmuel's folly. But then when he saw the pillar of fire coming into the world, he says now Rab Shmuel allowed all of us in the world to be able to access this folly, that we too can live such a lifestyle. We don't have to be limited to our intellect, or limited to our culture, or limited to our society, but we have the ability to truly transcend and go beyond all of these garments and all of these levushim and all of these limitations. And that is also the meaning of the Gemara. That first they said it was the branch of Rab Shmuel, then they said it was the folly of Rab Shmuel, then they said it was the approach of Rab Shmuel that brought about this pillar of fire into the world. The branch represents action. That's dancing. At first they thought that only on the level of mitzvos, of action, was Rab Shmuel connected to God on a level of folly, to go beyond limitation, beyond logic. But then they realized he was also on the level of folly, which means intellect. Even his kavanah, his meditation of every mitzvah, was also beyond intellect, was also beyond limitation. And then they said his approach brought about this fire. In other words, not only was it his prayer, or not only was it his dancing, his mitzvah, or not only was it his intellect that brought about this folly, but he was able to take the folly and bring it into his approach, into everything he did in the world. His eating, his drinking, his sleeping, his business, everything was done on this plane, not to be limited to the folly and narcissism and egotism of the rest of the world. And perhaps we can say that this is the reason why the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the leader of our generation, the Nasi of our generation, made sure that his Chassidim did many mitzvahs, but they did it on the level of folly. To take a mitzvah tank and to go onto 5th Avenue in the middle of the hustle and bustle of the entire business day. People are busy, they have to go work, and kids are standing on the street schlepping guys on a cold day onto a tank to put on film. You gotta be nuts, kid. What are you doing over here? Get out of here, get a life. Yet it's through the folly, it's through the folly of the mitzvah that we transform the folly of the culture. And simply to take a large moneda and put it in the middle of a town square, in front of Borough Hall, in front of the Supreme Court. Get out of here, put it in your house, put it in the window, don't bother me, give Chanukah to your kids. What do you want from me? I'm going to work, coming home, you have to stop me with a hot latke in the street. I'll wait till I get home to eat the hot latke. Also have to start dancing now on the street, on Court Street, in front of the menorah. Since when is it a mitzvah to dance on Chanukah on the street in front of a menorah? But it's this folly in which the Holy Temple was built. It's this folly that God tells Moshe you should make the Atzei Shittim. It's this folly that we have the ability to bring about the ultimate redemption. And this also ties in with another interesting fact. And that is, before the Rebbe passed away, and before the Rebbe had his stroke, he told his Chassidim and his followers that on Sukkot they should add to Hadassim. They should add additional Hadassim. Even though, according to the halacha, a lulav has 3 Hadassim, yet he said, I want you to add more Hadassim. It's interesting that the Rebbe's father explains that the word Hados has the same gematria as the word Chayim, which means life. Chayim is 68 and Hadas is 69. So Chayim plus 1. Imakoilel equals the same as Hadas. And the word tzaddik, which is a holy tzaddik, a holy person, is 3 times the word Chayim. 3 Hadassim. So by adding 1 Hadas or 3 Hadassim, the Rebbe was telling his Chassidim, you should know that even though perhaps I might leave the world physically, but the Zohar tells us, tzaddik dispate distakich b'chula amin yat b'chayoy, that a tzaddik that leaves the world is found now after his passing more in the world than before. Why? Because to begin with, the life of a tzaddik is not a limited life. It's not a life of food and drink and money. That's not the life of a tzaddik. The life of a tzaddik is based on 3 things. Number 1, emunah, faith. Number 2, yira, awe of God. And number 3, ava, love of God. That is the breath, and that is the food, and that is the sustenance of a tzaddik. And therefore, when he's in the levushim, when he's in the garments, it limits the tzaddik. When the tzaddik leaves the world now, he's no longer limited, but rather he has the ability to bring his light, his or, which or is 205, which is tzaddik plus 1, to bring his light of Ur Zerul HaTzaddik into the world and into his followers. And therefore, this idea of the Basi Legani, which is studied every year, is the connection of every chassid to the Rebbe. But more so, it's the last will and testament to remind us that it's okay to be a little crazy. It's okay to be a little wild. To do this with simcha, b'tuv levav, to do a mitzvah, to be proud of doing the mitzvah, and even though people will laugh at you and look at you like you're a little crazy, it doesn't matter, because we do other crazy things. So therefore, vayigba liboy b'darkei Hashem, lift up your heart in the path of God, lift up your heart with Jewish pride, and do a mitzvah and dance to the mitzvah, to the song, to the beat, to the ultimate song of We Want Mashiach Now. And we hope and pray that very soon, to see the coming of Mashiach and the rebuilding of the 3rd Holy Temple, and to see how God gathers together all the Atzei Shittim, all the mitzvos that the Jews did throughout all the years of exile. And we did it at a super rational level. We did it beyond logic, even though we were told not to do it and we were forbidden to do it, yet we went beyond time and space, and went beyond nature, and we went beyond all levels of intellect, and we access this level of folly to show God how much we love Him. That when we are with Him, we desire nothing else but God, and this will be realized with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days. Amen.